So, Donnie Darko, what the hell's that all about? Hi kids, this episode I thought I'd give you a kind of explanation as to what the film Donnie Darko means. This film came out in 2001 and still 13 years later leaves people after they've seen it scratching their heads in confusion. So hopefully I'll give you an explanation that will become your definitive one. So my theory I like to call the superhero hypothesis, and this is basically the idea that Donnie Darko is in fact a superhero in the sense that he has superpowers and uses them to save people. This theory is based on a number of things. Of course, it's based on things that actually happen in the movie. It's second of all based on stuff that was in the alternative reality game that came out when the movie was originally released, that I played a lot of. And thirdly, it's based on the book, The Philosophy of Time Travel, which I've read. Because it was included as part of the Donnie Darko script published thing. Remember that bit in Donnie Darko where Donnie Darko tells his name to Gretchen Ross and she says, that sounds like a superhero name, and he says, what makes you think I'm not? Now, I think that scene wasn't just put in there for a laugh. I think it was put in there, and in fact he was given that alliterative name as a signifier to show that he is, in fact, a superhero. First of all, Donnie Darko has superpowers. Now, what are those superpowers? Those superpowers are that he can perceive the path that people will travel in the future. In a sense, he can predict the future based on their current actions. This is symbolised by the scene when they've all got those time spears coming out of their chests, showing Donnie Darko which way people will go. That's essentially Donnie Darko's main power. That is his main power. He may also possess telekinesis. I'll talk about that in a minute. But we know for sure he can see these spears occasionally and know where people can go. So he can tell by what actions he can take. He can set reality off into a particular direction. The first time he seems to do this in the film is when he acts crazy in the school and creates a flood. Now he does this because he knows it will mean that he'll have the opportunity to meet Gretchen Ross in a more personal way as they're leaving school because of a flood. So at the first time he uses his powers, he is using them for relatively selfish reasons. This is a typical superhero movie trope. As you can see in something like Spider-Man, the first time Peter Parker really uses his powers is to win in a wrestling match because he wants a car to impress a girl. In exactly the same way, Donnie Darko uses his powers to get to know a girl. So you can see how there is a precedent for this kind of behaviour in a superhero. The three main questions that people have when they watch this movie is: one, who is Frank the Rabbit? What's going on there? Two, what's with the aeroplane? And three, what's with the "this is the day the world will end" business, the end of the world? Okay, skipping the second one for a moment and just looking at Frank and the way the world will end. In Donnie Darko, when they say the world will end, the question is, what world? Okay, so I want you to imagine there's a timeline. It starts off with Donnie Darko waking up on the cliff face, up until the point that the aeroplane motor crashes through his house. Okay, imagine that point is a breaking off point. Okay, between two possibilities. One possibility is that Donnie Darko is squashed. Another is that he isn't squashed. Okay, in this instance, we see in the film him taking the path where he doesn't get squashed. So the thing crashes through his bedroom and he doesn't get squashed. So that starts a timeline, right? And we'll call that Timeline A. Timeline A continues, and we watch this throughout the rest of the film. So at a certain point in the film, Donnie Darko travels back in time to just before the aeroplane engine crashes through and takes the other option, okay? So what we have there is a kind of time loop. A loop of reality that will never come about. And that world is the world that's going to end. This means, of course, that from the perspective of people in Timeline B, Timeline A never happened, and in a sense, it did never have happened, which is the same as that world being destroyed, right? As it gets closer to the point at which he'll go back in time, the fabric of that reality is slowly crumbling. That's what's with the tornadoes and so on, and with the various time holes. That's what's with the aeroplane engine being sucked off and pulled into one of those time holes. So we have a timeline which has a funny kink in it, a loop. During that loop, several people die, including Frank. And what it says in the philosophy of time travel is that when a person dies inside a time loop like that, they will be able to have the opportunity to try to manipulate the causer of that loop in order to affect the outcome of it. Now think about this, from Frank's perspective, if Donnie Darko was squashed by the aeroplane, he would never be there to shoot Frank in the head in the first place. So it's in Frank's interest to manipulate him and make sure that he goes back in time and corrects this time loop, or corrects this course of action. So what happens is Donnie Darko travels through that course of action, and during it, several people die, including Frank and Gretchen Ross, and possibly his parents on the plane, largely because of actions that he's taken. If he was not involved in those actions, if he was squashed by the aeroplane, then 99% of those bad actions would never have taken place. If he'd never used his powers to meet Gretchen Ross, then Gretchen Ross would never be there to get hit by the car, and if she hadn't been hit by the car, then he wouldn't have shot Frank. And if he'd never used his powers to get rid of Jim Cunningham, then his mum wouldn't have gone, and possibly if he had been squashed, maybe his sister wouldn't have gone either, because of all of the sort of funeral arrangements and mourning and stuff. So he travels through, and once he realises the mistakes that he's made by using his powers to see the paths that people will go, he gets in a car and he travels back, effectively kills himself, commits suicide, so that none of the events in the film will have had ever taken place. In a sense, he does the most heroic thing that he can in those circumstances, which is to give up his own life to save the lives of especially the woman that he loves. I feel like Spider-Man would have done exactly the same. Anyway, that's my what I like to call the Donnie Darko superhero hypothesis. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it allows you to understand the film a little bit better if you are to watch it again or just thinking about it. Like and subscribe. Bye. Ah yes, the telekinesis thing, I forgot. The reason why some people believe that Donnie Darko is also capable of telekinesis and possibly even flight is of course due to the one scene where it's clear that he somehow managed to embed the axe in the top of the statue, which is extremely high up, and that's a presumably quite tough statue. So either he flew up there and with super strength dug the axe in, or somehow he managed to do it with his mind. If I had to choose one of the two, I'd probably go with the telekinesis option, I guess. Or he could have just used a ladder.